we'll take a look at reloading ammunition.
Each rifle will not necessarily like the same load that my buddy has. Each rifle is onto its own.
Then a look at patterning your shotgun. 9 million acres of forest, 1,700 miles of continuous shoreline, 4,300 lakes, 12,000 miles of streams, more than 300 waterfalls, 15 counties, 2 time zones, and 1 area code. Welcome to the Upper Peninsula. Welcome to 906 Outdoors. .906 Outdoors is brought to you by Cooking Wild Seasonings. Make it fresh, make it yours. Whether you're shooting a rifle, a pistol, or a shotgun, for hunting, target shooting, or protection, the ammunition you choose is an important part of the picture. You may want to consider ammunition specifically tailored to your gun, commonly known as reloads. For the how and why, I talked to shooter and reloader Tiger Heberling.
Each shell that you make is your own, and it is designated to that gun. So that gun I can make literally shoot as tight. And to me, that's important. If you get that buck that's out there 70, 80, 130, 140 yards, and let's say, for instance, you've got a spot through the trees to shoot this big. Well, if your gun shoots a pattern this big at 100 yards, okay. But if your gun is shooting a 3/4 inch hole at 100 yards, you know you can make that shot. The confidence that you get in the rifle is unbelievable. That's the biggest thing. Pull that rifle up, you lay it on there with the crosshairs, touch it off, you know the bullet's going to be there. First thing that I do is I start going through the reloading manuals, and of course the reloading manuals show you the type of powder that you use and how many grains a shell can take. I've already done the work on one of the rifles that I use for this, and I have everything all in records that I write down. Records are extremely important, so that way you can just quick reference and go back to it. This one here, I started off at 53 grains, which was the mid-range, and then I worked myself up to maximum every half grain. And what I'll do is I'll take out 3 shells at 53, shoot them, see how they group. And if they start shooting tighter, tighter, and tighter, I'll put a star by it. This one here shoots 53.5 at the best. What I then do is I'll come back and I'll load 3 more with that. And then I'll try it again. And if it still shoots very good, I'll just leave it. Very good, it depends on the person itself. Most deer rifles, if you can get between 1 inch and 2 inches at 100 yards, that's more than plenty. The lungs of a deer are 16 by 18 inches around. 1 inch or 2 group is going to be plenty good. Bench rest shooters, 1/2 inch and under is about what you want to run with those. But everybody's different. Everybody's different. So the only thing you can do is play with it. There's tons of different powders that you can get for the different cartridges, but do your research on it. To me, that's the fun part. Do the research on what grain bullet the particular cartridge likes. Like the 30-06 was based around 180 grain bullet. Your 270 was based around 130 grain bullet. The little 243, 95 to 100 grain bullet. Do your research on it. That's what makes it fun. The biggest thing is, when you decide on a bullet, we shoot the nozzlers, make sure you get the book of nozzler. You don't want to start crossing over with different bullet manufacturers with the bullet that you're doing.
Today's show is brought to you in part by Rapid River Knife Works, home of Michigan's largest custom knife factory showroom. .30 caliber bullet, which is a .308. The same as your 30-06, your 308s. And at the time that it came out, of course, Winchester was the producer of it, and it also carried 30 grains of black powder. So it was 30 grains of powder, 30 caliber bullet, hence your 30-30. 30-06, everybody knows how that was done, right? Back in 1903, when the cartridge came out, it was adopted by the military in 1906, 30 caliber bullet. 1906, your 30-06. Today we're loading for the 30-06 Springfield. Head stamp 30-06, standard 30-06 shell, First thing you want to do is you roll it into the lube, and what we are going to do is we're going to size it. Slide it into the press, and this is called full length sizing. And full length sizing, of course, does just like it said. We size the full length of the cartridge. There's also what's called neck sizing, which that entails strictly doing the neck. Whenever you shoot a rifle shell in a chamber like that, what it does is it expands to the size of the chamber. And this here scrunches it on down so that way it retains its original size again. And then in the event that that brass gets used for another gun, it'll take it just fine. I do not like to do that for my guns. The brass that I set up is set up strictly for each gun. Wipe the grease onto it or the lube. Slide it into the shell holder. And there you go. There she's all set and done again. Now we got the shells all deprimed, resized. What I like to do is to go back through and check the primer pockets, just to make sure that they all look uniform, they're all clean, there's nothing in them. Being that these were new brass, I'll chamfer the outside. Just takes all the burrs off. Chamfer the inside. Just makes the bullet slide in a little bit easier. Now we got to do a little bit of priming. And of course everybody knows what the primers are. That's what gives the spark to the powder. Oops. We'll do 10 of them. And 10. Take my shell holder, put that into there. Now I'll take my large primer pocket, slide that into there, pull the pin, push that down, drops the primer in there. There's your product. And there's a certain feel that you want to get with this, and you can actually feel when the primer bottoms out. You don't want to crush it, but you want the primer all the way bottomed out. 53.5 grains is what that particular rifle liked. And again, I don't know if I mentioned it, but each rifle will not necessarily like the same load that my buddy has, his buddy has, his other buddy has. Each rifle is onto its own, and it has to do with a lot of the powder. We're using today IMR 4350. It's an all-around good powder. You can use it for 243, 308, 30-06, 270. It's one of the standalone primer or powders that is just plain good all the way around. Now we have to set the dual measure. And what this does is this just makes it a little bit easier to throw a larger amount of powder and get it close. Now it's a little bit too much, so we dump that back into the hopper here and redo it. I adjust that for the amount of powder it throws, and we'll scale it out again. Can work with that. This is called the trickler, and you keep spinning until it starts to trickle out. See, it drops it in real minute. We get what's called the seating die. Use a shell that I already have pre-done for Dad's rifle, 180 grain ballistic tip. Notice it's a dead shell. I put that into here and I use that as a model. Take the ram, push it all the way up. Now I take the seating die, lock that in, and that'll give us our correct depth just off the model. The shell there, got the bullet ready. Take our powder, kind of shake that into there. Put the shell into the press. Take your bullet. Again, that's 180 grain nozzler ballistic tip. Slide that into the case mouth. Bring it down until she bottoms out. There's your shell.
.906 Outdoors is brought to you in part by Christ, your Northwoods neighborhood store.
Now we'll shift over to the pistol. These are real easy. It's all set up with the powders pre-measured. We got the primers down the tube. New chunk of brass. Slide that in. Bullet. Bring her back down. Push it forward. That puts your primer in there. There you go. Each time you pull a lever, she drops out a bullet. First step that we do, of course, is depriming it, sizing it, and priming it. This step on the carousel pushes the little nozzle up, and it'll drop the correct amount of powder into that. And then also it bells the case mouth. Now, belling the case mouth, what I mean is that the last little bit up here takes it from this and it moves it out, so that way it's easier to accept the bullet when I put it in there. And then the last step takes the bullet and the brass and scrunches it together. This particular machine will kick out, I can probably do about 400 to 500 rounds in about an hour if I really stick to it. But it's mainly for the guys that do a lot of pistol shooting. Instead of single staging it like we did with the rifle, where each stage is done one at a time. This here, every time I pull the lever down and push it back, it's dropping a primer into it, sizing it, powder, belling, crimping, and then kicking it out. The cool part about this is about reloading also, is you always have the uncle that goes, well, I've got the shells, do you want them? Oh, yes, I'll take them. What caliber? I don't care, I'll take them, I'll take them. So next thing you know, you end up with 4,000 or 5,000 45 ACPs, couple 130-06, couple 100 270s. You're set. And the nice part is you don't have to keep going out and buying shells, buying brass. You've already got it. Everybody's got brass laying around. So you just get the brass in from Uncle Bob, throw that in the tumbler, and then again you put your media into there, let it sit on top, put the lid on top, turn the switch, and it vibrates is all it does. And then let it sit. I'll let mine usually sit for, I'll usually let it go overnight. So it's go on, say 10, 12 hours. Come back in, separate it from the media with one of these little buckets. So you pour all the contents in there into this, flip it around, and that'll actually knock all the media out. The media falls into the bottom of the bucket, so you got your brass inside the catch. You're all set. You've got shiny brass. And again, that works so much easier going through the press. Your press and your arms will thank you for it, because it just works so much easier. Like you saw when I was doing the pistol shells there. Just goes through so much better. This here is considered the grabber, model 8567 mech, and it's a progressive press, meaning every time you pull her down, push her back up, it does a shell. This one I have to what's called indexing, or move the shells to the next station is what it boils down to. So the first station, you got your dead primer in there, meaning it's fired, and a resizer. So again, just like the pistol press, first one she deprimes and sizes it, exactly what this one does. But this one here, you have to put the wad in there also, because it drops powder and it drops shot. And this also drops the primer, very similar to the pistol press also. So we got the wad in here, got the hull in there, push her down, you can hear the shot drop out of here. Powder, bring her back up. She dropped the primer. This one here, you can see that the brass is all resized, meaning it's shrunk back down again. It's deprimed. It put the primer in the little socket for us. This one here got the new primer in it. You can see that the powder dropped in there. This one here, you can see that the shot dropped in after the wad. So now what we do is we index it. There's your new shell. Again, you repeat the process. Put the hull in. Take your wad, push the handle down, bring her back up. She'll drop all the shot. She'll do the powder for you, puts pressure on the wad, index it. There's your shell again. Throwing green dot powder. If I remember right, it's 14.5 grain. And the grains, it's all set up in the charge bar, this is called, with a little bushing. And they all come with a little number on them. And then you look it up in my book that I have my manual, and it'll tell you how many grains is thrown with bushing number 30 for green dot powder. I'm throwing 3/4 of an ounce a shot. This is number 8 shot, because I mainly use the 20 gauge for shooting skeet. And these are just a Federal hull. There's the Winchester AA's, which are a great hull. I shoot those a lot in the 12 gauge and in the 410, but I've had good luck with the Federals. You also want to make sure that you're watching the primer, because again, if you move it to the next station and the primer's not in there and it drops the powder, you have a mess. You have this one here, takes it and starts the crimp. And the crimp meaning all these little guys start to fold in, like you can see here. And then by pulling that down, it takes it, sets it, and then the last stage, this one right here, takes the top of the shell and moves it in just a little bit, so that way it feeds easier in the action of the gun.
.906 Outdoors is brought to you in part by Blades Bait and Tackle, your year-round connection to fishing bait knock. You wouldn't think of heading out on opening morning of deer season without knowing your rifle is dead on. But what about your shotgun? It's not something we sight in, but we certainly should know what to expect when we pull the trigger. I stopped in at the gun shop to get the scoop on patterning a shotgun.
There's a number of different ways of patterning your shotgun, some of them practical, and a couple of them are very, very complicated and mathematically convoluted. Oberfell and Thompson is one of the complicated methods, and then the NRA method is also a very complicated one. With both of those patterning methods, you do your shooting all from 40 yards, and you're shooting at a main circle of 30 inches, and the percentage of shot that hits the target is then calculated and used to determine whether your shotgun is shooting a full choke pattern, a modified or an improved cylinder, or a cylinder pattern. And all of these complicated methods involve having to actually physically count how many shots hit or pieces of shot hit the target in whatever the area is that you're calculating. So there's a lot of counting and a lot of math involved. And there's a much easier way. There's a practical method for doing this process. With that method, you use a 30-inch main circle, just like the other one, but you vary the distance to the target. So at full choke, you do your shooting from 40 yards, just like they do with all of them for the complicated method. But then for modified, you go to 35 yards, for improved cylinder, 30 yards, and for cylinder bore, which is no choke at all, 25 yards. And what you're really looking for is your even shot distribution. You check your patterns and see how the particular one is that you used, but then you want to, just like you do for your rifle, selecting the particular load and bullet and so forth that is going to perform best for your rifle. You do the same thing with your shotgun, and you get a variety of them, and you try a variety of them, because no two are going to perform the same. Whether you're using Federal shells, Winchester, Estate, or Remington, it doesn't matter. They're all going to perform a little bit differently. And if you vary the shot size, that's going to be another variable. And then the other variable would be your dram equivalence of your shot charge. So what you want to do is select the one that gives you the best performance in your particular gun. I prefer to use a cardboard disc, and then I put my 30-inch core that I'm going to be using just by running a border on it, and then give myself an aim point for my shot. Okay, we've taken our shot from a prescribed distance. This particular distance happens to be 25 yards because I'm using a skeet tube, which is very close to a cylinder bore. Now we'll look at our target and see how this particular shell performed. We pretty well filled our 30-inch circle, and the pattern is fairly evenly distributed, but there are a few areas that are void of shot. When you're evaluating your target to know if the load is going to be a good one for that particular gun that you're shooting, you can just put your fists there for the voids and just put an X there or mark them if you wish, and then see how many voids you have in that pattern. This would have been a very thoroughly killing shot on most flying game. You notice on this particular target, it's a little heavier distribution of shot above the center line than it is below. And that's because most shotguns are set up so that your aim point being here, you would have your bird up in this position just sitting on your front bead. And so you want your shotgun to shoot up into this area more because that's the natural aim point that most shotguns are set up for. You notice in this pattern, they've done the 5-inch circles on it, and all of the 5-inch circles, there's a lot of them, which means that this particular pattern would not be a very effective pattern on game. So you better be shopping for a different shot shell. This one, much less voids in the core area, only partial one here. And if you notice the pattern, the major voids are down in the lower half of the quadrant on this. So this one would be a pretty adequate shell to use on game. So in summary, you can get as complicated or as basic as you want to. It is a good idea, if you want to be as effective in the field as possible, to go out and buy a few boxes of various shells to try. But it's interesting to know what your individual gun is going to do. And if that's the gun that you're going to stick with, you really should go to the effort of at least patterning it so that you know yourself how that gun is shooting.
Feel free to join us on Facebook or visit us at 906outdoors.com. And while you're there, be sure to sign up to get on the 906 Outdoors email list. Make sure you sign up before our fall drawing coming up in October. Along with other great prizes, we'll be giving away a gorgeous handmade knife from Rapid River Knife Works in Rapid River. Thanks for watching, and we invite you to join us next week for another adventure right here on 906 Outdoors.